And welcome to tonight's candidate forum for the State House District 56. And you cannot hear me? How's this? How's this? I better hold that. I better hold it up like this. Can you hear that? Sorry about that.
It's a response.
Okay, welcome to the State House District 56 and Senate District 28 candidate forum, both of which include Klamath and Lake counties. I'm Jerry O'Brien, editor of the Herald and News, and will be the moderator for tonight's forum. I want to thank Oregon Tech for the use of its facilities and the staff for helping us set up tonight. This event is also being live streamed on our website, www.heraldandnews.com tonight, and will be recorded and posted to the site at the end of the forum. We have our reporter, also Stephen Floyd, in the audience covering the event as well. Each of the candidates will be given a 1-minute opener to introduce themselves. Nearly all the questions will be on state government issues that the legislature deals with. So this is both a House and Senate forum. All questions will apply to all candidates. One set of questions, however, will focus on each of the individual candidates. We'll start at one end of the table and move down and then skip over or leapfrog as we do the next questions so that the same person doesn't answer the same question first, again and again. Each candidate will have one and a half minutes to answer a question, so keep your answers short and to the point, please. And we have a timer in the audience, Vicki McLaughlin, who will hold up a yellow card when the last 30 seconds are coming due. So keep an eye on her. She also has a bell. Yes, to end the time that you are allowed to talk. About midway through the forum, we will ask each of you to ask the other candidate a question. That is, the Senate candidates ask a Senate candidate a question. House can ask a question of each of the other two candidates. One question each, please. Also, if time allows, we will have a lightning round seeking a quick up and down vote on several topics for the candidates. With that, let's begin with a 1-minute opener by each candidate. And Mr. Lithicum, would you start, please, and then we'll move down the table.
Certainly. Thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. I appreciate the Herald and News covering an event like this, inviting all of you, and I appreciate you coming out tonight. My name is Dennis Linthicum. I am the candidate, the Republican nominee for Oregon Senate District 28. I am a former Klamath County commissioner, and as a commissioner, I interfaced a lot with state government and was conscious of always striving to introduce ideas of free market principles and liberty into the conversation. I think those ideas are paramount to how Klamath County can respond to the marketplace and make a difference in the community where we live.
Good evening, I'm Todd Keppel, very happy to be here and grateful to the Herald and News for conducting this forum. It's a great public service. The last time Dennis and I appeared together was a couple of weeks ago at the Klamath County Rotary Club Forum. And on that occasion, I made note of the fact that because we're both registered Republicans, we share a number of views on some important political issues. Tonight, I'd like to emphasize the fact that there are some striking differences between us. I am new to the Republican Party, having been invited to join the party and run this race. And I'm doing so on the Democratic ticket. That's a tough way to go. But I can honestly tell you that at least I have the confidence to know that every single vote I got in the primary, I earned through honest campaigning and not through any manipulation of the primary process. I'm also the only candidate in this race who has raised nearly every penny of my campaign fund within the district, the only candidate in this race who's picked up more than 20 endorsements from elected officials throughout the district.
Good evening, I'm Al Schweitzer. I'd like to introduce my wife, Vicki, who's sitting right out there. And first, I'd like to thank the Herald and News for putting this on. It's nice that we organize these forums and we get a chance to speak to you and to give you our views on the subject. Like so many others in this community, I was stunned and disappointed at the shenanigans that took place in the primary, obviously designed to eliminate any chance of a competitive race. Even in private industry, you are required to give notice. And 2 weeks is a normal notice. I think we can do better than that as a community. happy that so many citizens have backed me. I am happy that we are able to bring the other side of this out, and I look forward to this discussion here tonight.
I'm Joe Atkinson, and I don't belong to a party. I filed to run on a petition at the beginning of this year, well before anything happened in the primary. And I successfully was able to get on the ballot by talking to hundreds and hundreds of people, 550 people easily, 269 of which their signatures counted. But I've been all over the place. Now, my position is that I don't worry about the party conversations. My issue, when it comes to that, in terms of candidacy, how you're on the ballot, is that my party is my community.
Good evening. I'd like to thank the Herald News and Oregon Tech for this opportunity, and all of you for showing up tonight. I'm sure there's a lot of other things you could have done tonight, but I thank you for coming out and being part of the process. My name is E. Warner Reschke, and I'm the Republican nominee running for state representative in District 56, which covers Lower Klamath County and Lower Lake County. A little bit about me: I'm pro-life, I'm pro-gun, I'm pro-business, I'm pro-hydroelectric dams, I'm pro-water for farmers and ranchers, I'm pro-excellence in education, and I'm pro-liberty and limited government. And the E in my name, if you're curious about that, stands for elect. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the first question will go to Dennis Lithicum. Please give us an example of one specific bill that you plan to propose in the upcoming legislative session, and why.
The proposal that I would bring to the forefront would be actually more of a support initiative with regard to the PERS solution, which has been fostered with the bipartisan committee associated with Betsy Johnson and Tim Canoe, where they have had legislative council review maybe a half a dozen different alternatives that would help solve the PERS problem. PERS is sitting out there. You can think of it like a IED of financial responsibility if it's not dealt with in the very first part of this next biennium. And so I think that has to rise to the top in terms of fiscal responsibility. And I will do my best to give it legs and help that come to life within the session. I think it's important to recognize that the PERS problem impacts Klamath County, it impacts Crook County, it impacts Lake County, because it impacts all of your school districts as well, because all of those districts and local government agencies all have to deal with the PERS financial burden that is being placed on future generations. So it's ultimately of our great concern to solve that issue.
So the first thing I would like to see addressed, if I get the chance to go to Salem personally, would be to work on legislation that would prevent another shenanigan from happening, as was exhibited in our Senate district and in our House district here that we just witnessed in the primary. The Bend Bulletin ran an editorial a number of months ago that said voters should decide who their candidates are going to be, not incumbents. And so there's some way that we need to figure out how to do that. An example might be to set a deadline for incumbents to withdraw their name from, or to withdraw as a candidate after the deadline, so a candidate, an incumbent must withdraw by a certain deadline, or else his name stays on the ballot. And then other candidates would have a chance to recognize what the field is going to look like and whether they want to get in the race or not. And so that needs to be dealt with forthwith. There will be a number of complications in doing that. There are going to be a number of incumbents who are going to resist that. But in the issue of fairness to voters, it's something that has to be a top priority.
Okay, Mr. Schweitzer.
I too would look at that as the first piece of legislation that I would either sponsor, co-sponsor, or sign on to. I believe that what we've got here, and there's 4 other races in the state that this has taken place, is something that makes a mockery out of we the people. We fought a Revolutionary War so that you have the right to choose the people who represent you, not somebody else. We don't pass those things down. We have elections. That is our system. And I think we need to, with every ounce of our fiber, save that system. It's the greatest system in the world. That would be the first thing I would look at. The second thing I would look at is I think it's high time that the state balances their budgets. We have to balance ours. You have to balance yours. There isn't anybody I know that doesn't have to balance the budget one way or the other. And yet, we are looking at $1.3 billion shortfall that is going to face this legislature the minute it takes office. That is absolutely unacceptable.
Okay, I agree with Mr. Keppel and Mr. Schweitzer about creating a provision to make sure that we have a fair primary process. I do. Although that wouldn't necessarily be my first goal, it's definitely a priority. My first goal is K through 12 education and integration between high schools and our community colleges and their integration with our public university system. Because currently they're not doing that well together in this state. We have a lot of problems compared to other states. And our education funding scenario is an issue. Now, we can go into that. I'm sure other questions will probably bring up how we're going to get into that. But as it stands, yes, I agree with both Mr. Keppel and Mr. Schweitzer about not only having a balanced budget and having a safe and sane election process, but beyond that, we now have to put everything else out.
I think the big biggie is PERS. We're $22 billion in the red with this retirement system, and we can't continue. Our enemy is time, and if we keep kicking the can down the road, it will engulf all of us. So that has to be addressed first and foremost. Second of all, I would look at the minimum wage law that was just passed this recent session that will ratchet minimum wage in Klamath and Lake counties up to $12.20 an hour. All of a sudden, your value menu on your fast food restaurant is going to be $6 for a hamburger. It's going to make all your groceries more expensive. The guy or gal who pumps your gasoline is going to demand $12.20 an hour, and guess what's going to happen to our gas prices? I just came back from Texas. You know what the gas price is in Texas? $1.84. We're paying far too much because we have far too much regulation, and I'd love to get rid of the recent law that was passed in minimum wage and leave it where it was.
Okay, thank you. Next question is for Mr. Keppel. We'll start with him. Do you support or oppose the 4 hydro dams removal on the Klamath River and why?
Well, hydropower is just the greatest thing. Who would want to give up existing hydropower capacity? And it's so valuable because it's power that you can create on demand. It doesn't take time to ramp up power as it does with a gas plant or a coal plant. When you need the power, you can just turn it on, and that's so important because it's available when you have a peak demand. And so hydropower is extremely valuable to our community, to the grid as a whole across the country. But the question is, who owns the dam and the dams, and who gets to decide whether they go or stay? In this particular case, we're dealing with dams that are owned by an investor-owned utility. And so they're not owned by the public. They are owned by a private corporation, built by a private corporation decades ago, in most cases under a 50-year permit. Those permits have expired, and to renew those permits, Pacific Power must meet certain conditions, certain standards for fish passage and water quality, and Pacific Power has decided that it would choose not to try to comply with the requirements under those permits. So it's a private infrastructure. It's a privately owned utility, investor-owned utility. It's their call to make the decision on that. So, you know, there's also a bigger picture here that needs to be considered, and that's the fact that there are a number of water issues across the basin, including fisheries, recreation, power rates for irrigators, and water availability for irrigators. And so last year, there was an agreement that was struck that had the support of an amazing number of organizations around the state. It was opposed by just a handful of local officials, including some who are seated on this stage, and I thought that was unfortunate.
Mr. Swain.
I think the idea of taking dams out is really not a smart idea. And I have never really said we should take dams out, but I'm also a very strong proponent of private property rights. And I heard, I don't know, last week or week before last, that these are quasi government agencies. That is not true. These are owned by a private industry that is paying taxes. If you don't believe that, go and look at the tax structure and see what is being paid. If it was not private property, they wouldn't be paying taxes. They are what is called a peak power plant. And they're a peak power plant because there isn't enough water to run them full time. If we had enough water, they could run full time, but they can't. It's a simple matter. What breaks down to me is it water for fish or downstream interests, or is it water for agriculture? And I will always stand on the side of agriculture. That's where that water needs to be used. And that's where I would be. I still believe that I don't have the right to pick and choose who has private property. I think that's a slippery slope. And if you start down that, you're going to end up with problems somewhere along that run.
Okay, so this is a question that gets brought up a lot, but a lot of people don't know how little the state can actually do about it. The major stakeholders are certain county, special districts, the tribe, the federal government. So the state is sort of a signatory and moderator. So we don't really get to decide that much on the state level about it. And so that's a little bit difficult for a lot of people. Now, when it comes right down to it, I would have loved to see something really magical happen, like the dams get upgraded and everything be sold to local single buyers, you know, like public utilities. But you know, none of that is the case. What is actually going on is that the public has to fund the damage that's going to be done by the removal, and that part is something that we need to point. You want to point a finger at private industry, like they spent 7-8 years trying to get out from underneath having to pay for the liability of the dam removal in both states, in California and here.
Warner.
So I support keeping the Klamath River dams. I think hydropower is really our only renewable source of energy if you take renewable at its face value. Wind power goes through the wind turbine and the wind is gone unless you're in a hurricane or cyclone, which is a bad thing to be in. If you have solar, it comes down, it hits once and it's gone. But hydro, actually the water goes through the dam, goes out to the ocean, goes up, evaporates, comes back to the mountain and goes back again. It is a true renewable resource. So I think we should first define what renewable is and put hydroelectric dams in there. This issue is not in a vacuum. We're not in a classroom. The federal government has put their big fat thumb on the scale and forced Pacific Power to make the moves they're making. The state government has also put their big fat thumb on the scale, tipping Pacific Power to do what they're doing right now. As far as being a private business, they are, but they're also given region monopoly powers. And so they don't get to just decide what they want to do because it affects the public interest.
Thank you. Dennis?
It's a great question. Thank you, Jerry, for bringing this up. Everyone has mentioned an item that is relevant. The fisheries, for example, below Iron Gate will certainly be destroyed with dam removal. Upgrading those dams is doable. And the issue is, what would it cost? Well, the what would it cost issue drives us right back to the private property. If they're truly private property, why is it Warren Buffett and Berkshire Hathaway and their shareholders funding dam removal? They're not funding dam removal because they're hoping they can coerce local governments, state governments, county governments to support dam removal. Those dams and their reservoirs actually are nearly, the farthest one is 50 miles south of here. And in terms of elevation, it's 2,500 feet below our basin. That means it doesn't really provide agricultural water. To think that that water could somehow magically get used in our basin is a canard. What's really happening is private industry is using the government to help reduce their taxpayer or their private party liability. The dam removal entity that is a result of this latest compact carries no assets and no liability, and they've never done dam removal before. How did they become the dam removal entity? This is an interesting situation that needs to be addressed.
Okay, thank you. Now, I know we've touched on this subject a little bit earlier, but this next question is for Mr. Schweitzer, and it is, Oregon's pension system owes billions of dollars more to retirees than it has. And in the last major attempt to fix this problem, it was shot down in the courts. What is your solution, or what solution do you back for reining in PERS?
You want to do that in a minute and a half?
Yes, please.
Good luck. I don't know if there's a silver bullet. If you look at the PERS situation, and thank God Klamath County is not a PERS county. So if you're sitting here and you're thinking that I'm a former county employee and I'm the PERS employee, I'm not. The only PERS employees we have are sheriffs. But I believe that what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to fund it. And the reason we're going to have to fund it is because it is a contract. The contract was made with the retirees. Whether the contract's good or the contract's bad, it doesn't make any difference. It's a contract. Now, unless you want to go break contracts. So I think what the legislature is going to have to do, and they've not wanted to do this, and not want to touch it, is how do you fund it? And how do you fund that unmandated amount of money? Quite frankly, I don't think anybody should retire at more than what they were making when they were working, but that's how that system is working. But I also believe that there's a way that you could cap the people who are making that $400,000 to $500,000 to $600,000. One of the big examples they throw out there is a professor from OHSU is retiring at $55,000 a month. That's more than a lot of people make in a year. That's ludicrous. So I think you have to look at some of those things and pull those back in and then have the guts to try to get it balanced. And I haven't seen the legislature have that intestinal fortitude to do that.
Okay. Well, first of all, to the sheriff's department aren't the only PERS employees here. School districts, special districts, and a bunch of other people. Actually, every public employee here has access to PERS. And more importantly, now to Schweitzer's point about, I'm going to address this because I think he's right. There's a solvency problem. It went from, I think, $15 billion to $22 billion of unfunded liabilities, which has nothing to do with this deficit or the hole it punched in our budget. Those are totally different things. Most trusts run some kind of unfunded liability. Now, it's gone up a lot in a very short period of time. So what I would say, the first thing that we do with PERS is we bring the PERS board in front of the joint committee between Senate and House committees, and we make sure that they're accountable. Maybe we can't guarantee an 8% return or a 7.5% return or 7.25% return. Maybe we have to go down a little bit. The market conditions just might not be affordable. But I don't think getting rid of it is a good idea, because PERS is one of those things that creates people who get salaries for police officers, firefighters, teachers, you know, they aren't that great. So the incentive is a deferred incentive, which is invested. And that's what we need to maintain in order to make sure we're still attracting people to the things that we want people to do to operate as a civil society. So that's my answer to that.
Okay, thank you.
This, I mean, the whole idea of PERS, in order to run a pension, you have to have one thing to do that. You have to have profit. And government shouldn't be in the business of having profit. But they've guaranteed these rates, and so here we are. I think what Al said and what Jonas said is correct. We need to cap this thing so that people aren't walking away at $55K a month or whatever. I know Mike Bellotti, former coach of Oregon University Ducks. I'm a Beaver, so this one really gets under my fur. Makes a lot of money not coaching anymore. We should cap it. We should create a new system, and every new state employee go into the new system, and not continuing to compound the problem we have today. This idea that we're guaranteeing rates is quite fascinating. 8%. What did you make on your retirement this year? You made the market rate. Why don't we tie PERS to the market rate? A novel concept, I think. Thank you.
Okay, Dennis?
The issue with PERS isn't necessarily continuing and figuring out how to fund it. The issue with PERS is stopping the bleeding. When you've got a leak, you plug the leak and then go about fixing it. So the first thing to plug the leak and stop the bleeding is essentially to cap PERS. Current employees get their bit. New employees come into a new system. One of the things that would change the numbers drastically would be to avoid the last 3 years of employer salary as the average, move it to 5 years, move it to 7 years, move it to 10 years. You can imagine how in the lifespan of a 30-year employee, the last 10 years getting averaged together would make a big difference into how that works out in your PERS benefits package. The other item that would be a viable alternative would be to limit the annual PERS wage benefit to $100,000. The question you'll then ask yourself is, well, gee, who couldn't live on $100,000 a year? Do we really need to pay those, quote, special employees the $400,000 a year that they're earning today? And I think the way to beat this back is to use real rates as well. Using real rates immediately in the calculation will cause necessarily, so be prepared, the unfunded liabilities to blossom.
You know, when I walked up to the building tonight, the door I approached was locked. I couldn't get in the building. And the only person who could see my plight was Dennis Linthicum, who was kind enough to let me in so that I could attend. When it comes to questions like this, Dennis, I think maybe I'd have been better left out, because there are no easy answers to this question, and none of the adjustments that have been discussed here tonight are going to solve the $22 billion liability that we face. And so there's either going to have to be new revenue, or there's going to have to be really drastic cuts that I believe will hurt Oregon. Ballot Measure 97, I believe, is a measure that's probably opposed by most of us at the table here tonight. I oppose Ballot Measure 97, the corporate income tax, because it was poorly written and it raises twice as much money as we need in order to solve the budget problems at hand. I suppose if the measure passes statewide, it will fall to the legislature to try to craft something that is a more sensible reform of our tax structure. And I hope that if more revenue is raised, that there will be a time limit, a sunset placed on that measure. Since we're here in Eastern Oregon, we're likely to get outvoted on any such measure. I would hope to appeal to our friends in the urban centers that any new tax that's passed in order to solve this situation must have a time limit on it so that it expires and could only be renewed by an action of the legislature or a vote of the people.
Okay, thank you. The next question is for Jonah. Gun control issues continue to surface across the state. What specific gun control laws do you support or oppose, and why?
Well, gun control is kind of roughly equivalent in my mind to car control. I grew up, I had 100 safety course that my parents wanted me to go through. I grew up with responsible education about handling weapons. I understood their danger at a very early age. And I have no problem with them. I like them a lot, actually. But, you know, overall, I think any sort of sensible regulation is sensible regulation. It's a dangerous machine. Okay, that's all it is. And it's almost entirely designed to do damage. I mean, a car is designed to take you to work. A gun is designed to do damage. Now, should we require people to be registered, have background checks, go through maybe even training at an early age? I mean, I think all of those things are questions we can raise, and I think they're valid. Because, I mean, we can just all have them and do whatever we want with them. It's not an answer. And I don't believe, by the way, in holding gun manufacturers accountable or in making them the criminal, because they didn't do anything. You know, they just, you know, it's like a whole Ford Motor Company responsible for somebody drunk driving. But you know, we have to take serious steps to make sure that we're making an honest approach.
There's a golden rule when it comes to guns, and it is this: he who controls the guns rules. Our Second Amendment was put in place because the founders knew that we did not want to have an inability, if the government grew too big and wanted to take control, like the monarch in England, the citizens needed some sort of recourse. And so they wrote the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment is there so that we can defend ourselves. It's not for hunting. It's not for collectors, although those are great. It is for us to defend ourselves from a government gone awry. Can guns hurt people? Yes. But really, it's people hurting people. And that's a much bigger problem. I'm an NRA member. I'm also endorsed by the Oregon Firearms Federation with a 100% score. I think we have actually too many regulations right now on gun owners, and would look to sensible solutions in providing liberty to own guns.
I agree with the idea of this right shall not be infringed. That's part of the wording of the Second Amendment. You can read it for yourself by looking it up. The reason it's important isn't for hunting. It is primarily for defense. It is designed, as Jonah said, for hurting or destroying, but don't think of it like the car example, because cars kill on an annual basis nearly 40,000 people on our roads and highways annually. Guns come nowhere near that, and there isn't a push to take cars off the street. There is only a push to take guns off the street. And so I think this right shall not be infringed is one of those important bulwarks against our abuse of your liberty and my liberty. So I think guns play an important role in self-defense as well. Thank you.
Over the last few months, as Dennis and I have both been traveling around the 5 counties in this district, I think there's probably no other question that's been raised more to me as a candidate as what my views are on gun control. So certainly a pertinent issue, and my views on it, first of all, are that it's a classic case of where so many of the problems are caused by so few of the people. And so laws that impact all of the people in order to try to control the few are difficult to write and they're difficult to enforce. So I think where I would start, first of all, I think we need to revisit this bill that was recently passed that requires background checks for private transfers of firearms between friends and relatives. And so I would like to start right there. The area that I would like to explore is the behavior issues that are behind so many of the crimes that we see. I don't think they're gun problems. I think they're behavior issues, they're family issues, they're poverty issues. And so we need to craft legislation bearing this in mind, that so many of the episodes of mass shootings that we see and horrible incidents of violence, they all have a root in some kind of a mental instability or some kind of personal distress. And that's the root of the problem that we need to get to.
I'm a strong proponent of the Second Amendment. I think you have a right to keep your arms. I think if you look at areas where they have tried to take this away, or they have taken it away, they have chaos. Look at Chicago, Illinois. They have some of the most stringent gun laws in the United States. They also have one of the highest murder rates in the United States. So the people that have the guns are the people that you'd like to make sure don't come into your house. The other thing I think should be pointed out is in all these mass shootings, have you ever seen one of those in North Dakota or South Dakota or Wyoming or any place that people pack? You don't see it, because if somebody came into a theater and started shooting people, somebody would have a weapon and they would answer it. And yet you go into these places that have these strong laws and there's no weapon. So I think your right to own a weapon, a firearm, is guaranteed to you by the Constitution, and that's where it should stay.
Okay, thank you. This question is for Werner. Republicans have been for some time frustrated by the Democratic majorities in the House and the Senate. Hence, not much that the GOP proposes makes it through the session. What makes you think you'll be more effective than previous lawmakers of getting a bill you back through the legislative session?
Thank you. Well, as a businessman, I've had to navigate waters that are far more difficult than what I've had to navigate jumping into this race. I've worked for 3 Fortune 500 companies. I've owned my own business for 16 years. I've dealt with presidents, vice presidents, and the common man on the street who wants a service. What I always look for is common ground. Doesn't mean I compromise on my principles, but I'm always looking for common ground. How can we make this situation a win-win? And one of the things I want to do when I go to Salem is to have lunch with Tina Kotek, who is the Speaker of the House at this point, who's a Democrat. And that may surprise you as my staunch stance as being a conservative, but I want to get to know her, because I think that when I form relationships with people, it makes it a lot easier to work with those individuals. Even though we may have political differences, I think for most of the legislators, they want to do the right thing for Oregonians. It's how we execute that, how we accomplish those things. And that's what I'm looking for. How can we find win-win solutions, not just for legislators, easy for you to say, but for all Oregonians.
Solving the great divide between rural Oregon and urban Oregon is at the heart of this issue. There are essentially 4 senators that are on the west side of the Cascades, and the east side composes the other 26 senators. And so without much trouble, the west side really pulls a lot of weight because of the population and the number of entities that are bound up in the population centers. I think it's important to recognize that there are there are big issues that can be solved by articulating the pros and the cons based on facts in the real world. If we get stuck in rhetorical ideology, we will get stuck in arm wrestling about issues that have no bearing whatsoever. When we start talking about the math and the facts and the figures, now all of a sudden we realize we can find common ground and solve a problem that will be good for all of Oregon. And as I realize, I think I may have had east and west backwards there in my 4 to 26, but I knew you were smarter and figured out that I really meant the east side is underrepresented.
I think one of the reasons that I was approached back at that time when the mayor called a meeting and said we need to find some people who might be interested in making this a contested race for this Senate seat and for the House seat as well. And I was invited to attend the meeting, and I was considered, and I made it clear at the meeting that, you know what, I'm not even a Republican. I'm a lifelong non-affiliated voter. But I was invited to get in this race with no conditions placed on me. I later agreed to side with Republicans for this race. But I think the reason that I was asked to get in this race is because I have a 25, almost 26-year record of living in this community and building rapport with people. And I believe that that's what we need to do in Salem, is to not go up there with a chip on our shoulder about the liberal Democrats and those people who live in that corridor between Eugene and Portland. But we need to go up there and participate in good faith with the issues that all Oregonians care about. And then when we've built that rapport and built those relationships and developed those networks, then we can ask them to take some time to look at our issues. And I think we'll be more successful that way.
Well, the simple math is there's a lot more of them than there are of us. And if we don't go up there and start cooperating and trying to figure out ways to get things done, we're not going to get anything done. I'm not saying go up there and take your core values and throw them out. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying, you've got to be able to talk to people on the other side of that aisle. You have to do it. Now, there's going to be times you aren't going to find anything that you agree with. That's fine. That's just how it's going to be. There's other times you are going to find things that you can agree with. And you start building those relationships. That's how you get things done. There is no way that somebody from Eastern Oregon is going to go up there and just make the whole thing change and do what they want. You're going to have to work at it. You're going to have to sit down at the table. And you're going to have to probably gulp a few times because you're going to hear things that you really don't believe in. But you know what? There are areas that we all have common problems. Transportation is one of them. You know, we all have that. Clean water is another one. You name those. Those are things that are problems in Multnomah County and they're problems in Glamis County. And that's where you start to make that discussion. You start to sit down and you start to talk.
Thank you. John?
Okay, I'm gonna go with most of what Todd said here, but I'm gonna tell you guys something else. How is it that you compromise without compromise? And I'm gonna go to something else. What needs to be done is for all of our laws to follow Article 1, Section 20 of the Oregon State Constitution, which said that, all laws and, all privileges and immunities, that are granted to any citizen or class of citizens in the state apply to everybody equally. Okay, that's in the state constitution. It's in the first page. I mean, I don't know why these guys haven't read it. But what I'm going to get to is that what we need to do in terms of arguing for Eastern Oregon, yes, absolutely, and for our part of Oregon down here, which has an exceptional need, I do agree with that, and I will do it. I'll make sure of it, and that's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you. We're going to mix it up here a little bit now. We're going to allow each of you to ask a question of the other. And we're going to start with Mr. Lithicum. You can ask a question of Todd, and then Todd, you have your chance to ask a question back of Mr. Lithicum.
Let's see, the question I would have for you, Todd, tonight you've mentioned on several occasions that you've not been a Republican for long. You've been a Republican since March of this year. And you were nominated by the Democrat Party. Those were the only write-ins that nominated you to the Democrat ballot, which is the same party of Kate Brown and the same party of Barack Obama. And I'm assuming you pledged some sort of allegiance to their Democrat Party platform. How at the same time and in the same way can you pledge an allegiance to Republican principles and the Republican Party platform?
Well, I made no pledges to the Democratic Party, but I am grateful to more than 600 Democrats around the district that wrote my name in, that took the time and had the presence of mind to recognize the situation that had developed in the Republican primary. And so I'm grateful to the Democrats that have supported me in that effort. I'm also grateful to the Democrats that have been active in my campaign committee from the very beginning. But my campaign is made up of a broad cross-section of voters of all stripes from within this community, and it's been a real pleasure to work with them. My presumption is that I will caucus with Republicans and try to help Republicans maintain some semblance of power within the Oregon Senate. It's going to take some fence mending because right now the Oregon Republican Party is working against me in this campaign, and they've endorsed you as they must because you came away with the Republican nomination. So as I've said from the beginning, my view is that in order to accomplish things, in order to advance our interests in rural Oregon, we need to work together with rural Democrats from around the state. We need to build those relationships. I think I'll be in a great position to do that because of the situation that's developed here.
Okay, Todd, and now you may ask a question of Mr. Lithicum.
We've been reading newspapers around the district, and we've noticed that every newspaper in the state has editorialized, every newspaper in the district has weighed in with a comment about the appropriateness of the way the Republican primary was conducted with Senator Whitsitt waiting until the day after the filing deadline to withdraw from the race, and with you filing 3 minutes, less than 3 minutes before the filing deadline. And then it was reported afterwards that you dithered over whether you should challenge Doug for the seat or not. That was reported by the Bend Bulletin in May. But it had already been reported by the Bend Bulletin in March of that year that Senator Whitsitt had approached you last year to recruit you to run for the seat. And then earlier this year, he came to you again and encouraged you to file for the seat. Those stories don't seem to line up to me. And so I wonder if you could clarify exactly what discussion took place between the two of you as the primary filing deadline approached.
Certainly the issue has been reviewed over and over and over again. The election division of the Secretary of State's office, that's Gene Atkins' office, reviewed all of the details associated with this, and their office published fact findings that said there was nothing done that was illegal, there was nothing done that was unethical, and they emphasized there was nothing done that was unusual. And so I think even Jerry O'Brien, the editor for the Herald and News, ran his editorial piece where he clarified nothing was done that was illegal, unethical, or unusual. And because all of those people who have reviewed the facts have come to the conclusion that everything was done in a perfectly legitimate fashion, I think I can stand by my decision to jump in the race when I jumped in the race. And Doug Whitsitt certainly has the freedom to withdraw at any point he chooses to. And so I appreciate the concern, but we can't get sidetracked by gossip or rumor or imagination, speculating all day long doesn't bring reality to the table. And I think the Secretary of State's Election Division did a good job of that for us.
So, okay, folks, let's continue with the debate. Mr. Schweitzer, I would ask you now if you could ask a question of one of your opponents, and both, one, or whatever you choose.
Okay, my question is to Werner, but certainly Jonah can jump in and answer it also. Werner, this is a picture of my voter registration. It's dated 1977, and it says Republican. This is my certificate for being elected a Republican precinct committee person this year. You know my party affiliation is Republican. You have repeatedly told people I am a Democrat. As a Christian, I could never knowingly make those kinds of false statements about you. So my question to you is simple. Why? Why would you knowingly spread false information about my party affiliation?
Well, first, you're assuming that you know all the conversations I've had with every voter, and then that's what I've said, which I don't think you have that knowledge. But you ran in the primary. I beat you in the primary, the Republican primary. You won the Democrat nomination. They invited you to run as their candidate, and you willingly accepted that. So I'm calling you the Democrat in this race. That's who you are.
Could I make a clarification? Sure. I actually went to Warner. You and I both tried to win the independent, and I was a successful one on the independent side.
I didn't try to win
So
the
I
independent. Was focused on the
So I
Republican.
have two of them.
Yeah, you do, but you don't belong to either party.
Would you let me finish?
Sure.
And I did not seek the Democratic nomination. It was people out there working. I appreciate the fact that they did, but I am a Republican. I've been a Republican my whole life. In fact, I was voting Republican, I think, long before you got the vote. I've never changed my party. And yet you have told people at your booth and at the Republican Central Committee booth, you yourself have said he is a Democrat. Those people have come down to me and told me that.
Al, so you said this question is at large, right?
Pardon me?
I can say something.
Sure.
All right.
Sorry.
Okay, this is why I don't belong to a party.
That's it?
Wow.
Touche. To the bell ring.
Are you done?
I don't think you can answer.
Okay, so,
You left?
Yeah,
Jonah, so you get a chance now to ask a question.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess just run a really actually nicer question, which is both my opponents. And that is, how many people did you talk to face to face in order to get onto the ballot? And if you did, you got a number about it. Tell me at least one interesting thing about it. Al or Werner?
Well, I'll go first. I decided to run because I decided.
No, how many people?
Right. And I talked to my wife, I talked to my pastor, I talked to a couple other close people such as Dennis and Diane Linthicum, but it was my decision to run, nobody else's decision. And in the final analysis, I decided to run. It didn't require, there's no requirement in the Oregon Constitution saying you must speak to so many people before you decide to run if you file before March 8th. So I talked to the number of people that I thought was necessary for me to make an informed decision, and that's what I did.
well, it's actually might be something that Warner and I are actually going to agree on. I talked to my wife and I talked to my pastor. Those are the two most important people that I wanted to talk to you about this. I obviously had run before and I understood what it meant to jump into a race, as anybody that has done that. And but those are the two main people that I talked to, and then I had a slew of friends that I always bounce things off of, and I talked to all of them to see what was going on. I was not looking for this job, but I really believe that when we talk about this.
And you've been consistent about it, you said that to Rotary.
Yeah, well, I believe when we talk about we the people, that is not a slogan, folks. That is what we live by. If we truly believe that, then we don't do the backroom deals. I don't care which side of the fence you're on, you don't do that. And I believe in we the people. You are we the people.
Okay, and so Warner, you get to ask a question of the other two.
Sure, my question is for Al, and Jonah, you can jump in if you'd like. Former, because you have a little bit of leverage. Former County Council Dan Bunch said in a letter to the commissioners on June 19, 2008, quote, "The Klamath Basin Restoration Agreement is a dam removal agreement whose signers agreed to support and advocate for dam removal." He continued, "While this point is obvious, I raise it because I've heard people express general support for the KBRA, but not for dam removal. If you do not support dam removal, this is the wrong agreement to sign. I see no way around this basic point," end quote. So my question is, as county commissioner, did you not ignore your council's advice by signing the KBRA, therefore advocating for dam removal on the Klamath River?
Well, you make a very dangerous assumption. And the assumption is this, and any commissioner who has served, I think would probably back this up. The council gives you his best advice. He is not the person that makes the decision. That was Dan's best advice. I was so tired of seeing this community torn apart, and this community trying to reach some kind of solution. I said it before, I will say it again. It was not for dam removal, but I am for farming. And although the downstream dams have nothing to do with irrigation, if it was a deal, and that's what it was, that we could see some semblance of order for our irrigators, not a guarantee, because we live in a high desert, there's no guarantee of water, then I think we should take a look at it. Was I happy with the KBRA? No. There were things in it I didn't like at all. But that doesn't mean that you sit back and you just watch an industry just die. It's a $400 million industry, folks. Take that out of our economy. Where do you think Klamath County would be right now?
Okay.
Because I don't have the experience that he has, you know. Then I really can't add anything to that one.
Okay, let's change the subject a little bit and start with Todd on this one. Klamath County remains at the bottom of job growth, as does most of southern and eastern Oregon. What are your ideas to bring economic prosperity back to the region?
I admire the work that's been done by the Klamath County Chamber of Commerce and the Klamath County Economic Development Association, and the discussions that have taken place between Klamath Community College, Oregon Institute of Technology, and our high schools to create a workforce training program that brings students through starting in junior high and the early high school years, and starts getting our young students on a track to be able to learn skills or trades that they can use right here in the basin, because I believe young people are our greatest resource. There is no easy answer to the situation that faces every small town and every mid-sized city across America. This society that we live in is becoming increasingly urban, year by year and decade by decade. And so the best thing we can do is to prepare our young people to be able to make a living in a modern economy and with modern technology, and stay right here at home to do so.
Okay, Mr. Schweitzer?
Certainly education is key. We need to keep our best and brightest here instead of shipping them off. I believe the key to it would be to, instead of looking for companies to come in with 200 and 300 and 400 employees, because you're probably not going to get them, is take the company that has 20, 30, 40, 50, somewhere in that neighborhood, and start building on that. And using the base that we have from not only OIT, but KCC, and use those kids that are coming out. Maybe you incentivize them and get them started. Maybe there's startup money in other ways that where you can get it. But you get them to stay in town, and then you diversify. So you've got to diversify the economy. Remember back when we had timber, we had the second highest per capita income of any county in the state. Now we're 26, 27, 28, somewhere in that neighborhood. We can't afford to slip. We need to go forward. And I think we've got the jewel just sitting right there in OIT. We just need to utilize it.
John?
Okay, so I'm gonna maybe remind people of some stuff we did in the 90s that was really bad. Because we thought all of our homes were all gonna be worth, 3 times as much before we retired. Measures 5, 47, and 50, they're all cap and cut provisions. Measure 5 explicitly capped the amount of money that a school district can raise or county can raise for its schools, just about schools. Now, I agree with what he's saying about education, absolutely. But you have to look at the fact that we've limited the ability of local communities to raise their money, okay? To fund schools, literally just saying, just K-12 stuff. Now, if I want, my first priority, like I told you before, I'll tell you again, is K-12 education. We're going to reduce classroom sizes, we're going to bring back programs to small and rural schools, and we're going to integrate those schools with their community colleges. Those community colleges are going to get integrated with our public university system, and then you're going to have jobs. Now, that's not going to make our economy wonderful overnight, but it will do it eventually.
As unpopular as this might be, I don't think job growth should be the goal. I'm a capitalist, and I think the goal should be profit, because jobs come from profit. You have to be a profitable business before you can think about hiring somebody new to do another job. So we have to figure out ways to help businesses locally make more money. That's farmers, that's ranchers, that's whatever. Second of all, I don't believe in the central planning model. I think that we need to find policies that let business owners figure out, be more expressive, and be able to create greater profits. Klamath and Lake counties are unfortunately at a huge disadvantage regionally. We're the furthest away from any major metropolitan area in the region. And so our cost of doing business has to be less than that it is in Jackson County or it is in Deschutes County. It's got to be less. That means our gas prices have to be less, our energy prices have to be less. The cost of doing business here has to be less. And we need to figure out policies that enable that so our businesses can grow.
I will echo those concepts. Lowering the cost of doing business is the best way to create a profitable environment. Those kids who are coming out of OIT and coming out of high school and Klamath Community College, those kids need to be incentivized to see opportunity to stay. The best way to make it easy for them to stay is to reduce the regulatory burden, reduce the taxes, reduce the overhead, reduce the number of fees and permits required to get a business started. Once you allow them that opportunity, potentially even here at OIT with the OHSU facility coming in, with the hospital right there, the possibility for a tech center all of a sudden looks quite robust. And this could be the anchor that blossoms into an entirely new industry. I also think it's perfectly appropriate that we use our forest and land resources wisely. We use our water and agriculture wisely. All of these things are opportunities for our young folks to get involved in their parents' farm, their parents' ranch, the cattle industry, as well as the high-tech industry and software and robotics. All of these things are available to us. What we have to do is reduce the burdens so that they easily see their chance to make a difference in their lives as they stay right here in Klamath Falls. Remember, at one time, Klamath Falls was the largest city east of the Cascades.
Okay, thank you. It's hard to believe. We're going to do a lightning round here, which means a quick up or down, yes or no response, if you would. Now, I know you may want to expound on that a little bit, but try to limit it to 10 seconds. Measure 97, which we touched on, the corporate income tax for sales over 25 million for corporations, yes or no? And I'll start with Al.
No.
Did you answer?
Go.
Sorry.
No.
Which way are you going?
Going this way. Go to.
I think you switched.
No.
Say.
No.
Did you answer?
It's your turn.
Oh, sorry, no.
No.
Okay, it's unanimous. Let's see, GMO labeling, and Jonah, we'll start with you. Statewide GMO.
Statewide GMO labeling?
GMO.
Yes.
No.
No, I think the private sector can organize labeling better than any government industry can. The government requirement will no doubt create winners and losers in the labeling issue.
It's a yes or no?
That was an obvious no.
Okay, thank you.
No, I think it's a great marketing opportunity if companies, producers want to market GMO-free products, but to require GMO labeling, no.
Now, this is the difference, ladies and gentlemen, between the House, which is the people's house, and the Senate, which is the Imperial Senate. The answer is no.
Okay, Warner, we'll start with you and then go back around the table. ODOT budgets for infrastructure seem to be leveraging our future, that is borrowing money that is not there to cover their costs. Are you okay with that? Pro or con? Do you have a solution?
How many questions was that?
How about, are you okay with that?
No. And then what was your other question?
Pro or con? Well, do you have a solution?
Do I have a
A
solution?
10-second solution.
ODOT needs to learn to live within its budget. It's $2 billion budget, only $325,000 actually makes it to the road. There's a serious problem in the management of that organization.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, go that way. Go
All
ahead.
right, I would say, kind of what he's saying, although not exactly what he's saying. I would say this, like a lot of things, certain government agencies need to have oversight. They need to be brought to the table, they need to be brought in front of the House, that's the House's job, and that's what I intend to do. We need to ask them, what's going on, why are you doing this, what's wrong? And make them explain it. If they can't explain it, we'll hire new people.
Jerry, which way are we going?
You're up next, sir.
Okay, so would
Just
you restate-
changing it up just to
would you
shake things up.
restate the question again?
Oh, ODOT budgets for infrastructure seem to be leveraging our future, borrowing money that is not there to cover costs. Are you okay with that?
As a general rule, I am not.
No.
Well, you made it easy. Oh, that's even easier.
Right, I disagree with borrowing out of the future when there's no one there to generate those needed resources.
Okay.
Speak up, sir. I can't hear you.
I'm sorry, yes. Okay, we just have a couple more questions and then we'll go to our closing, but this next one is water shutoffs were felt throughout the basin again this year. There's some dispute over whether the Oregon Water Resources Department should be allowed to shut off private wells for the benefit of the rivers. What's your take? And I will start with Mr. Top. I'm sorry. No,
With me?
yes.
So this is not a yes or no question.
No, this is, you can expound on this one.
You left out.
Water shutoffs on private wells. You can expound on that if you like.
Okay.
It's not a lightning round.
Yeah, so that's a problem that's been studied for a number of years, and there's a number of years of research left to do. And again, that's not for judges to decide. I believe it's for experts to decide within the Water Resources Department. But we're not there yet. We don't have all the information we need. And so we've got some difficult times ahead of us, as we've seen here in the Klamath Basin. Was that a yes or no answer I just gave you? You know, I guess I don't have a yes or no answer for that. We need more research.
Okay. Mr. Schweitzer?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Your turn.
I know.
It's a tennis match. I think this might be the adjudication question, I think is what he's talking about. And my understanding of the adjudication process is if you have a well and they're going to turn you off, you have an appeal process. And what I favor is if you're in that appeal process, your well doesn't get turned off. Now, if you lose the appeal, okay, you've had your day in court, but I don't think that they should arbitrarily just come in and shut down your well and then tell you, well, we're doing this because of adjudication. I think that's the question. I don't know if that's yes or no, but.
Again, I have a terrible answer to this. Kind of like Todd's. It's not to put Todd down, but there isn't really a yes. There isn't a yes or no answer to this. I mean, he's right. I mean, when it comes to we don't have enough research, we haven't figured it out. I'm going to trust him on that because he probably knows more about it than I do. But I would go with that. I have looked into it at length. I've talked to some people dealing with agriculture and secondary irrigation system, like where they have to drill wells and that kind of stuff because of our water irregularities. And I've been hearing about it since the late 90s when my aunt was a farmer. I mean, it was a constant conversation. Now, I don't think, like I said, that we can just say, oh yeah, that's terrible, we shouldn't do that anymore. Like, we don't know yet. And in order to find out, our job as legislators is to find out. And that's the thing, is bring that board to the table. Again, I can just keep saying that over and over. Because that's what a government, that's what we do. That's what our job should be.
Okay.
Is this a lightning question?
I'm sorry, no, it's not.
No, it's not. Okay, so
You can expound on this.
Okay, great. So Oregon Water Resources Department is a classic case of state government gone amok, awry, wrong, in the sense that they have the ability to create regulation, which is a legislative duty. They have the ability to enforce their regulation, which is an executive duty, and they have the power to adjudicate their decisions, which is a judicial duty, all within the executive branch. That, my friends, is not America. That is not separation of powers with checks and balances. That is an executive administration going hog wild. In 2013, OWRD reversed the burden of proof to shut off wells. The farmer and the rancher must prove they're innocent. They're assumed guilty by a computer model derived by the OWRD. That means the farmer and rancher has to hire a hydrologist and actually measure water and prove an adjudication before the OWRD, again in the executive branch, that indeed they are not affecting downstream flows. So this is something that is totally wrong. This is one example. It's throughout the whole government, and we need to get rid of this administrative rule and go back to checks and balances and separation of powers.
Okay. Mr. Lithicum.
Oregon Water Resources should not have the right to shut down a well without proof of harm. This is essentially what Werner was describing. In historic water law, when there is a call for your well because a priority water holder deserves that water, there should be proof of harm done from your take of water to the primary water holder. As a secondary water holder, you shouldn't be limited from your access to that water given the computer model, as was referred to, but it should actually be measurable data that gets that actually proves that your water take is causing harm to another individual who has a superior water right. I think that concept of the department itself needs to prove harm rather than the individual farmers, because you can realize how many different opportunities there are and how much money would be wasted by every farmer on every stretch of land, every parcel in Klamath County or Crook County trying to prove that they're not harming some other user. It should be, the burden should be actually on the Oregon Water Resources Department and not on the individual farmer.
Okay. And our last question, we'll start with Mr. Schweitzer. How will you address Oregon's implementation and management of the Affordable Care Act? Change it, discard it, enhance it, improve it? What's your take on the Affordable Care Act and its effect on Oregon?
Well, it appears to be a mess, and a mess has to be cleaned up. I think I would start by finding out why we would spend $300 million on a computer system that doesn't even work. I think I would find out why in these tight budgets that we think that's okay, and it's not. I don't think anybody is going to say we're going to throw people out in the street, we're not going to have health care. But I would go back to what I originally said. We're $1.3 billion in the hole. That's a lot of money, and that's a lot of money for a small state. And then you think of our population and how that equals out, it's terrible. We are going to be faced with making some tough cuts. Or we're going to be faced with raising taxes. Now, there's a lot of people who think that's okay. I do not. I do not believe the legislature should be raising taxes. I think we're going to have to make some tough cuts. And is some of that cut going to be in healthcare? It may be. It may have to be. We may not have a choice. But we've got to get this state back on a solid footing. And, you know, you balance your budget, I balance my budget, county balances their budget. Why doesn't the state balance their budget? It just doesn't make sense.
Okay, Jonah?
Okay, so we're talking about the exchange website. Okay, well, yeah, it was a mess, but it was a mess in a lot of states. As a matter of fact, it was a mess just on national level. There were multiple contractors that made mistakes, big ones. And actually, a lot of them were just trying to, pump up their government contract as best they could, like web developers tend to do. So one of the things that I'm going to point out, though, is that what we can do at the end of the day, right, when it comes to dealing with our compliance with ACA, it's been fixed. It does work. My wife, Raymond, has used it. Works fine, not a problem. So now it was broken, but they fixed it. Now they fixed it, and it cost way too much money to do it. And this is one of those things I'm going to go back to oversight. The job of legislation, and people, we get to set up committees and bring people in these boards up to sit down in front of us and tell us that they're doing their job later than when we have these problems, and that's what we're supposed to do. We're not the executive branch here. That's not what we're running for. We're running to question and pass laws.
The Affordable Care Act. Just think about that for a second. It is not affordable, and it does not care. It's health insurance by central planners and masterminds who think they know best how to run insurance and regulate an insurance industry. I really think we need to go back to the idea of private insurers deciding what they want to provide and the marketplace deciding whether they like that or not. I think we can fix this mess really quickly by doing three things. One, let's allow insurance companies to compete across state lines. Two, let's let doctors open up clinics and donate their time, and pharmaceuticals donate their resources to help the poor so we can clean up our emergency rooms so they're there for emergencies. Most doctors I know want to help people. They're not there to make a big buck. But we got to give them, and by doing that, they can take it off their taxes. The time they donate, they can write off their taxes. So it's a federal issue, but I really think that when you get government involved in the center of this industry that's 1/6 of our economy, we can see what's happening, and it's just killing us.
Okay, Dennis?
I think the healthcare issue is clearly going downhill since the Affordable Care Act, and unfortunately, Oregon is right in there with the other state exchanges, as was mentioned. The problem is we've eliminated the patient from the decision-making process. This puts the decision-making on the wrong end of the horse. And because the decision-making doesn't belong to the patient, there's not this ability to pick and choose and shop around. Whatever the local hospital is charging is what you pay just because you walk in and show your card and that's what you get. And there are all sorts of other issues that get layered on top of that. I broke a pair of reading glasses, one ear stem broke off, and I called Costco where I got the prescription filled and said, can you just build that same pair of glasses? The girl at the front desk, somebody in her 20s, said, I'm sorry, Mr. Linthicum, we can't do that. It would be breaking the law. And she said that with her full courage to tell me that I was about to break the law to ask her to manufacture a set of glasses, quote, because the prescription was more than 2 years old. And so now all of a sudden we have this churning of the marketplace. And this is what happens when you get the wrong decision-making coming from the wrong end of the spectrum.
Okay, Todd?
This is the question I'm least prepared to answer because it's such a complex problem. One observation I would make is that in our society, we're not ready to go to a single payer system, and yet we're not completely ready to turn the entire healthcare system over to the private marketplace because we'll have haves and have-nots. We'll have people who cannot afford any health insurance. The system we have now is so difficult to manage because we cannot persuade healthy people to buy into the system. And without that, we can't make the system work. And so I think the Affordable Care Act, the days are probably numbered for that act. Whatever takes its place will probably cause just as much unhappiness and uncertainty as what we have now. So what can we sort out here? In my mind, Oregon has been a leader at times in the past in coming up with some innovative ideas in dealing with welfare and in dealing with healthcare. And at risk of alienating my friends in the Republican Party, I think a certain doctor who has fallen on hard times politically recently, once upon a time had a good idea for establishing which healthcare services can be delivered to people who are going to be on something like the Oregon Health Plan. And that's the first place where I would start to sort things out.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for answering all the questions tonight. We're going to go to our closing comments. And Jonah, we're going to start with you. Each of the candidates has 2 minutes to give their closing statement.
Okay. Now, just like all these other guys, you know, I talked to my family, I talked to my wife before I decided about it. Then I went around and I talked to about 550 people. I went to their doors. I went to where they shopped. Some of them invited me into their homes. And it didn't matter if they were Republicans or they were Democrats. It didn't matter if they had gone to a party or not. When I showed them my petition to get on the ballot, they were, every single one of them, well, not all of them, they were registered, 9 out of 10. They all signed it, almost all. Now, that told me something that I didn't think I would find. To be honest, I thought it'd be a lot harder. And at the end of the day, this wasn't just like in one neighborhood. So I went to Malin, Merrill, Bonanza, you know, Lakeview, here, a lot here, obviously is where I live. But it was important. And I heard the same 2 things over and over again. Fix our schools, give me jobs. And I said, I'm gonna work on that. And that's the only thing they said. They didn't babble on about, water or farms or anything. I mean, yeah, there were some farmers that said things about that, but they're only about 6% of the workforce, so you don't run into them that much. And it wasn't, they're huge, they make up a huge amount of our economy though. So, and I had to learn that from them. And I went and talked to him. I went to KCC, I went and talked to Keith at KCC, and he sat down, he told me, he's like, it's 80% of our GDP in Oregon, it's 20% of our workforce. He's like, it's not a small deal, man. I said, I'm not saying it is, but it's not very many people. And he's like, there's more people than you think, because people run hay presses, it's truckers, it's all these other people, right? There's all kinds of stuff. Now, what I'm gonna say about that is that what I learned was that our scenario is more diverse than we think it is.
Thank you.
My campaign slogan is your liberty first. And that's actually shorthand for your life, your liberty, and your pursuit of happiness first, but that doesn't fit on a bumper sticker. It's more than a slogan though, it's what I truly believe. I believe that we have to have life in order to have liberty. And that's why I am pro-life. And I'm not just pro-life, I'm endorsed by the Oregon Right to Life in this matter. I also believe in liberty. And that's why I believe in gun rights and gun ownership, because I think it's the safeguard to protect us from an overwhelming government that has become really a monster. And I just don't think it, others think it. I'm an NRA member and I'm also endorsed by the Oregon Firearms Federation. And then I'm for the pursuit of happiness. And unfortunately, pursuit of happiness is misunderstood today. It doesn't mean to get to do whatever you want to do. The pursuit of happiness in its classical sense, when the founders wrote it, meant pursuing a life of virtue and character, not vice and debauchery. So as a legislator, I will pursue policies that promote virtue and character, not those policies that allow for vice and debauchery. I'm honored to be the Republican nominee in this race. I'm endorsed by the Oregon Republican Party, the Klamath County Republican Central Committee, the Klamath Basin Republican Women, and it will be my honor to serve you all as your legislator in the State House. Thank you.
Thank you. Dennis?
If you were to go to Orstar, you would see that I too have been endorsed by several different political action committees. And I want to expose a little bit about those political action committees. The NRA, Oregon's Firearms Federation, Oregon Right to Life, the National Federation of Independent Business, those organizations got created to help push back against government overreach. I think that's the single most important thing that people can do is get involved politically. You're here tonight because you're involved politically, and I appreciate that, and thank you for being here. Being involved politically means using your resources to help change Oregon's economy, help change Oregon's legislative priorities, help focus on issues that need to be focused on. Focusing on the PERS issue is a #1 priority because it's 22,000 million unfunded liability. 22,000 million. When we talk about needing $100 million for K through 12 education, that's peanuts compared to an unfunded liability of 22,000 million. And we face a economic problem area if none of us are willing to go to Salem and address this issue. So I thank all of the people who have supported me. I'm proud to be endorsed by the Jackson County Republicans, Klamath County Republicans, the Deschutes County Republicans, as well as the the Federation of Republican Women, both in Central Oregon and here in Klamath. I am proud to have won the Republican nominee for this upcoming general election.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Keppel?
Well, I'm certainly happy to congratulate Mr. Linthicum on so many endorsements from special interests outside District 20. When I thought about getting into this race, when the dust settled on the Republican primary here in Klamath County, when I came away with just the Democratic nomination, even though I'm a registered Republican, I consulted with a number of friends, decided whether this was a race worth running or not. So many people came to me and said, Todd, please run this race. It's as if we owe it to the founding fathers to have a contested election.
Yeah.
And so here we are having a contested election, basically a runoff between two Republicans. Yes, I'm new to the Republican Party. I never would have dreamed I would be running for office. And yet within just a few weeks, I was able to pick up the endorsement and the support of the mayor of Klamath Falls and all 5 members of the city council, the president of the Chamber of Commerce, the president of the Downtown Merchants Association, the chairman of the county school board and the chairman of the city school board, and dozens of leaders within the community in the business and education and healthcare sectors. But it's not just in Klamath County that I was able to pick up so many endorsements. I've really enjoyed campaigning in 4 other counties, in places like La Pine, where I easily picked up the endorsement of rancher Paul Hatcher, and in Shady Cove, where I was able to pick up the endorsement of Mayor Tom Anderson and President of the Council Tom Sanderson. In Lake County, County Commissioner Ken Kessner and former County Commissioner Jane O'Keefe, and in North Lake County, alfalfa grower Alan Parks, great individual up there. And way up in Prineville, the chairman of the board of county commissioners there, known as the county judge, Commissioner Mike McCabe, Judge Mike McCabe, and the mayor of Prineville, Betty Ropey, and many other leaders in the ag and timber and business communities. I believe I'll also be able to win friends in Salem, and people in the legislature will look at Klamath County with a smile for once.
And last but not least, Mr. Schweitzer.
Well, make no mistake, there's a reason that we have 2 Republicans running in the Senate, and 2 Republicans running in the House, and Joe. And there's a reason for that. And the reason for that was a backroom deal. You can call it anything you want. You can couch it any way you want to couch it, but it was a backroom deal. And it wasn't illegal. I agree with that. I disagree with it being unethical. So what we've got is a clear choice. And I would encourage you to go to Orstar. Go to the Secretary of State, go to Orstar, and look at who's putting money into whose account. And you will find that there is a lot of outside money going into Mr. Rutsky's account. Now, that doesn't come without some strings. I'm sorry. They don't just give you that money and pat you on the back. So there will be a day of reckoning. What I am really proud of is the fact that we ran a clean campaign. We ran a write-in campaign, one of the hardest things there is to do, and we were still able to get 2 of the 3 endorsements. Now, that is not bad. And we gained about 21, 22% of the Republican vote. Kind of depends on how you look at it. But what I'm really happy about, really proud about, is the people who have endorsed me. Congressman Greg Walden, former Kingsley base commander, and retired Colonel Steve Harper. Colonel Harper is my campaign manager. I've also been endorsed by former commissioners, Bill Garrard, John Elliott. I've been endorsed by Kelly Mickey Morris, Donnie Boyd, and Derek DeGroot. What do they all have in common? That's your new board of county commissioners. And all 3 Lake County commissioners. And Jane O'Keefe, who is a past Lake County commissioner and also a past Association of Oregon Counties president. I have been endorsed by several Chamber of Commerce presidents and business owners. Those are people who live and work in the communities in which District 56 is part of. Those are not outside people. Those are not people who are up from special interest groups. Those are people that represent us. I was upset when I saw what happened. I wasn't planning to jump into the race, but I was upset. And I was upset for one simple reason. Not all of you are Republicans. I realize that. But the Republican Party that
Now the bell's been rung twice.
Just wrap it up.
The Republican Party,
No, I mean,
Yeah, seriously.
the Republican Party that I was, and yeah.
Mr. Schweitzer, like, the bell's been rung twice.
Did it ring?
Yes.
Twice, 2 times. I was looking out for you.
I thought you were just fooling around.
No,
My apologies.
I got a cool around.
Well, gentlemen, thank you all for being here, and audience, I think they all deserve a round of applause. Good luck to you all. Thank you. Yes.
A little bit, but that's the worst thing to happen. No, he didn't.
Looking out for you, man.
Good job.
Okay.
Yeah.
It was streaming.
Was it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, good, good.
In the office, my company sells newspaper features.
Okay, yeah, stop by anytime. Usually it's there. You want to log in. How's that sound? And you're living here in town?
Doris,
Oh, yours. That's right. Gotcha.
I had that idea about the Cascades. Question is, session, the regional national leaders coming to during the session. Let's see how try to talk.
That'll work. Well, give me a call.
Okay.
Okay, thanks. Yeah.
Did you hear the security in the audience?
I did not.
Stealing the water.
That's something I can't do. Your microphone's horrible. It's just, this one's picking you up on church. It's not working well. Did you see it?
Was it?
She wasn't. How do you take that down?
Lower this.
Oh, it looks like you got some of the best frog cake. Yep. Well, I didn't really roll that in the street. Hold it over a little bit. There we go, back. The rest of the stuff is stuff.
So that should be on YouTube, correct?
Yes, it should be. Right, if not, you know, we'll call Joe. Call Joe. He'll kind of hand it out. Okay. Well done.
Thanks.
Yeah. Once every, what, 2 years we'll do this?
Once every 2 years, that's all. That's all we can handle.
I think it's gonna be a tough call without the ed board, seeing that, going through the whole video.
Yeah.
You know, like,
Stir things up a little bit.
I know.
Anyway.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. No, they always email. Yeah. I wish you'd go through that. No, it's all me. So, this next thing, I take my cell phone, push the record button, I hold it out here, and just talk to them, and got some issues. I'll try to get somebody that's going to be close to it, stand right there, and right there, and the rest of it, say, I'd like to do one of those.